all, and this is my 29th video discussing 1950s British science fiction paperbacks. In this final video telling the story of Hamilton's Panther books, we can see some quite astonishing developments that were to create publishing history. In February 1953, Hamilton's created their Panther library, whereby all their regular 1 and 6 titles were also published simultaneously in hardcover. They were initially in light blue cloth, as you can see here, uniform light blue cloth with 144 pages and priced at 6 shillings, with a full colour laminated cover. Let's just spread this out so you can see it better. There's the new Panther library dust wrapper, and you see on the back cover it had a rather nice house ad rather than the ugly ear pal adverts which were on the back of the paperbacks. And on the back cover flap there was a house ad announcing the new titles. There were 6 initially. There was Foreign Legion, Westerns and Science Fiction, 2 titles each. They would add to their crime and romance titles the following month. And on the inside front flap, they had a nice about the story. Okay, let's just have a quick look here. Embossed on the covers was the Panther logo with the words Panther books either side, picked out in gold. And because the hardcover was thicker, the spine was wide enough for the embossed letters of the author and title, followed by the publisher Hamilton and Science, to be written across the spine rather than sideways, which is the case on the narrow paperbacks. Right, moving on. Where the 1/6 price was on the paperback, the hardcovers had replaced it with a little oval there with the letter P for Panther and the words Library Edition in the space where the 1/6 price tag was printed. Otherwise, the covers were identical, with the new Panther logo in the top left, the Panther button there. The first 2 science fiction titles, Andro the Life Giver by John J. Deegan was number 38, and From What Far Star by Brian Berry was number 39, and they continued the series numbering on the paperback spines. See here? But with their little cameo Panther head no longer in colour. The hardcover dust jackets didn't carry the numbering on the spine. As before, all the Panther book titles were normally original novels, but there were just a few exceptions, as with The World Below by S. Fowler Wright. This was a science fiction classic which Panther published in both hardcover and paperback. It's number 44 in March 1953. However, confused collectors should note that this book is a retitling of a 1924 book, The Amphibians. This had previously been reprinted in 1929 by Collins as an omnibus volume entitled The World Below. Let's see here. The World Below, Collins, 1929 omnibus edition. The Amphibians was part 1. This was the Panther, The World Below, was actually the Amphibians was part 1. And then in this edition, they published a sequel as part 2, which was called The World Below. This was the first publication of The World Below. So they were both together in this omnibus volume, and Panther Books split them up and they retitled them. The sequel was also later reprinted by Panther in January 1954, but retitled as The Dwellers, albeit in paper only, as Panther couldn't get the world hardcover rights. The World Below was quite a long novel, so Hamilton's edition was printed in smaller type and the page length increased to 160 pages. The hardcover was priced at 7 and 6, but the paperback still remained at 1 and 6. With just a few exceptions, all the Panther's following titles were now 160-page originals, still priced at 6 shillings and 1 and 6, continuing with number 47, Atoms in Action by Roy Sheldon, and 48, Ken Bulmer's The Stars Are Ours. This title is especially notable, with Ken Bulmer here writing real science fiction of a higher standard than his early space operas, but more particularly, it had the first Panther book cover by a brilliant new artist, John Richards. Richards was so good, he would eventually do very nearly all the Panther science fiction covers through to the last one, number 193, in 1955. Richards would then go on to an even greater success as the art editor and chief cover artist at Corgi Books. The only further Panther science fiction cover exceptions to Richards were a couple by George Radcliffe and the great Ron Turner. We see two of them here on the April 1953 releases, numbers 57 and 58. Berry's The Venom Seekers, Radcliffe, and Deegan's The Great Ones, Turner. This was also notable because it brought the old Growler series to a poignant and impressive conclusion. These two had black spines, as Hamilton's began to experiment. Numbers 59 through 85 would have brown spines before they changed to yellow and finally white. The blue boards later diversified into red and black boards. Now then, these Panther dual hardcover oblique paper series were fantastically successful because Hamilton's enterprising sales force had now succeeded in selling the hardcovers direct to the myriad lending libraries now to be found all over the country, in newsagents and general stores, in all kinds of little shops, including a chiropodist on Wallsend High Street. They didn't need to rely on selling to specialist bookshops. Sadly, these very popular and well-used lending libraries would eventually be killed off in the UK by the advent of commercial television and the lifting of paper rationing, which enabled mainstream publishers to flood the market with paperbacks. Smaller hardcover genre publishers who relied on lending library sales went out of business. Now, it's impossible in this single video for me to describe and show all of the remaining 30 interesting titles in both hardcover and paperback, though I have copies of both, of course, but you can at least see all the remaining paperback covers here. Just have a look at them. All the remaining Panther paperback covers in the science fiction series. It's just time to mention a few notable ones. In the top line, in the top row, near the middle, you'll see Dimension of Horror by Sidney J. Barnes. This was his first science fiction book. A great friend and client of mine, unfortunately Sid did not live to see his best short story, The Animators, made into a major motion picture, Last Days on Mars, with a screenplay by Clive Dawson. Towards the end of the second row, you can see the Metal Eater attributed to Roy Sheldon, but this was actually by E.C. Tubb. A fun book, it was Tubb's tribute to Jack Williamson's Legion of Space series, which he'd enjoyed in his youth. And towards the end of the second row, Deep Freeze by John Burke saw Ron Turner's last Panther books cover. Now then, here's what I want to draw your attention to. Something not generally known to be found here. I've got a bit of a bee in me bonnet about this. Not many people seem to be aware that round about autumn 1953, Panther began issuing unique extra editions, paperback oblique hardcovers as paperback variants, of which all dealers and most collectors remain willfully ignorant and disgracefully ignore them. Whenever the library sales dropped, and Hamilton's found they'd printed too many hardcover copies that month, they took the unbound hardcover pages and instead of adding expensive boards, they rebound them as paperbacks, but with covers using the hardcover printing plates. They then distributed these hybrids alongside their regular paperbacks. The hybrids used the hardcover dust wrapper imagery on their covers and on the spine and back cover. See here, there's the hardcover, and there's its back cover, biography of the author. The paperback had the dreadful tobacco advert, and the hybrid, which was made of the same paper as the hardcover, that also had the thing. So you see that is the case with all of these books here, with the hybrid on the end. There you see them. They are the counterpart of the hardcovers, and they didn't have the ugly tobacco adverts on the back. Right, let's just put them back. So we're going to enjoy the covers. So what's not to like about these hybrid editions? It makes them prime collectibles. They're much superior to the ugly paperback. I can't understand why ignorant dealers are not informing the public about these hybrid variant paperbacks. I've been shouting about them for years. Alas, a lone voice in the wilderness. So let's just take a closer look at a few of them. Here we see John Burke's two best Panther novels. The weird fantasy epic, The Dark Gateway, so good it was allowed to run to 224 pages, which created a hefty 8 6 price tag. The science fiction novel, Twilight of Reason, carried his photo on the back, as we've seen. H.J. Campbell's best novel, was Brain Ultimate, and this one had a house ad on the back rather than the tobacco advert. And it was H.J. Campbell who edited Sprague de Camp's new anthology. Campbell had met the noted American author at a science fiction convention in the United States and enterprisingly arranged to edit this unique collection of short stories. Since it's never been reprinted in America and never been printed anywhere else, this has made it the most valuable Panther science fiction title. What price this complete set of 3 editions? Because these hybrids have been ignored, they are fantastically rare, not least because there were probably only a few hundred issued in the first place. Heartland's managing editor, Gordon Lansborough, had earlier resigned in protest at having to continue to publish its gangster filth titles, beloved of the mushroom publishers, and, it must be said, deluded American collectors today. Having been brought up on American sleaze, they think British gangster rubbish is cool. Lansborough didn't think so, that's why he resigned. The shocked and contrite publisher then persuaded him to return by offering him a completely free hand. Lansborough then transformed Panther books, dropping the gangster filth, but indeed all of the original fiction. All gone. The whole line was cancelled. The whole of the Panther fiction line was cancelled. It was a massacre. Only one survived. Authentic Science Fiction Monthly survived the total massacre. By the summer of 1955, the Metamorphosis was complete. Need to talk about them later, but manually. So here we see the new Panther books. Only the finest cover artists were used, such as Josh Kirby, still famous today for illustrating the Terry Pratchett books. Mortalmans, very famed artist who also did lots of covers for the New English Library. And greatest of them all, Reginald Heed. Heed had reinvented himself as Cy Webb. Can you see his signature there? Cy Webb. That was his middle name, his middle names. And he used it instead of Heed to successfully hide and escape his litigious mushroom past as Heed on gangster paperbacks. There we see the Heed on his gangster paperbacks, which he was escaping from. Now then, Heed's outstanding cover for the Blackboard Jungle resulted in the Blackboard Jungle being Hamilton's runaway bestseller. So great was the demand that they decided to switch the paper for Authentic Science Fiction magazine to feed constant reprinting of the Blackboard Jungle. The magazine was cancelled in September 1957, even though it had been profitable. Its editor, E.C. Tubb, told me sadly, the publishers decided that the money tied up in it could be put to better use in the publication of paperbacks in their Panther Books series. Panther Books then went on to become one of the leading mainstream paperback publishers in the UK, and all thanks to the far-seeing Gordon Lansborough.